And hello from Sydney, and welcome to the Proof of Concept podcast, the tech show where we explore real life use cases from the field and discuss some of those hot questions in data science and AI. I am your host, Grant Case, and today we are very fortunate to have Tom O'Toole join us. Tom is the Associate Dean for Executive Education and a clinical professor of marketing at Northwestern University in the United States. He is also an accomplished author, a board of directors on CWT, and also a senior advisor to McKinsey and Company. In addition, Tom and I have worked a little bit together in one of his classes, and I'm very, very happy to have Tom today come to talk to us about personalization. Welcome to the Proof of Concept podcast, Tom.
Thank you, Grant. Great to see you again. Greetings from the campus of Northwestern University, just outside Chicago, and look forward to talking with you and everyone.
Fantastic, fantastic. And so today's topic is really about something I think is near and dear to all of us, or at least it's something we deal with every day. And that is really the concept and idea of personalization. So personalization being whether we're on our phones, whether we're on websites, even when we're shopping within stores, personalization is something every organization is really engaging in. Especially most marketing organizations today. So Tom, tell us a little bit about kind of personalization in general, and what has been your interaction in your career with this concept?
Sure, thank you. And this conversation today really brings together two of my favorite subjects that are very much integrated in actual practice these days, which are customer strategy and AI. And really where they meet in the middle these days integrally is at personalization. Because just to put it in some context, today I would argue, and this may be a little bit heretical sitting here.
We love heretical here.
Where brand strategy, was one of the pillars of brand strategy for years. But I personally believe that today, customer strategy is arguably more important than brand strategy. And the term that you will hear used today is customer centricity, based on customer differentiation, customer heterogeneity as the foundation of customer strategy to achieve the aim of growing customer value. If you take customer centricity with the aim of growing customer value all the way to its extreme, where you end up is growing customer value at the individual customer level. In other words, personalization. And if you take it to what is the leading edge of personalization today, it is AI-driven, AI-enabled personalization. And so the leading edge of customer strategy to grow customer value today is AI enabled personalization. So that's really how these subjects are very integrally related.
Interesting. And I guess we kind of start off at the Proof of Concept podcast here about, around our 5 questions. And that first question really is, what's the cool stuff we can do with personalization? I think we're all kind of familiar with, when we go on to Amazon today and it's like, here are the products that are similar that you might be interested in. But what are some of the things that we don't know about, or we don't think as much about personalization, and where marketers or just businesses in general are really starting to drive a lot of value?
What we can do today is to optimize, maximize customer value at the identifiable individual customer level at scale, meaning for millions of customers individually, simultaneously, and do so economically. What's interesting is if you go all the way back to 1993, back in the day, there was a book. It was one of the most popular books, maybe the most popular business book of the year in 1993, called, as I recall, One-to-One Marketing. And it was a fine book. The challenge was, the concepts were right. The challenge was the technology really wasn't mature enough yet to actually operationalize personalization at scale. Meaning to have millions of customers individually optimized in terms of the messaging, the interaction, the offers, and to do so in real time at scale. Fast forward from 1993 to today, and actually to about 5 years or so ago, now the technology has matured to the point where we are able to personalize, meaning to differentiate Grant's interaction from Tom's interaction from someone else's interaction in real time at scale, and to do that using AI and machine learning to actually personalize the interaction based on patterns in the data, based on characteristics of that customer relationship that may not even be evident, perhaps even to the customer.
Interesting. And I think for all of us, it's one of those, we all kind of hate having the things come to us that we don't have an interest in. But really, when things are personalized, it's almost an aha moment. It's like, I've had that a couple of times on Instagram where it's like, how did you know me that well?
Yeah, well, and you just touched on a very important point, which I will pull out as relevance. Personalization right now, companies in a wide range of industries are investing in personalization in a big way, and particularly in AI enabled personalization. And while marketing can be an area that is prone to the buzzword du jour, I don't think that personalization is going to fall into that category. I think this is an enduring phenomenon. Why? Because demonstrably personalization works. Why works? Personalization is an effective means to grow customer value, particularly at the individual customer level. Now, the point is that if you look at why does personalization work? Why does personalization work so effectively? The answer is because of relevance. And in my, over caffeinated little mind, the way that I think about it is that data, and particularly data driving AI and machine learning, data enables relevance, relevance increases effectiveness, effectiveness produces value. But what it's really all about is relevance.
Yeah.
And AI enables us to be extremely hyper relevant to the individual.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of the key for all of us when, how do you create that relevance? And that to me is like, that's the mana. That's, where the magic happens itself. So I guess my next question, you're on multiple boards of directors. You work with a lot of CEOs at Northwestern through the executive education program. We Eli 5 our CEO, but you're Eli 5ing a lot of CEOs about explaining it like it's 5 to them around personalization. So how do you have that conversation at a board level about what personalization is?
We can talk about what personalization is. At the conversation at the board level, it is, or at any level for that matter, what is personalization? Personalization is delivering the right message at the right time through the right channel to the right customer. Now that uses the word right a lot there. What do we mean by right? Delivering the most relevant message through the most relevant channel at the most relevant time to the customer to whom it is most relevant. Now, but here's how I would have the conversation at the board level, or with the CEO or with the CFO. This is not an exercise in methodology or an exercise in technical, proficiency. What this is really about is growing customer value. That's how I personally would ground the conversation at the board level or with the CEO or with the CFO, is set aside AI, machine learning, personalization, all of that. If I'm the CEO, why should I care? In the end, it comes down, why should I care? The reason you should care is because what this enables us to do is to grow the value of our customers at the individual level and at the aggregate level. Particularly for, if you think about the customer life cycle, and we acquire customers, at some point we have customer attrition, we try to minimize that. But what more and more companies and what more and more marketers are working on doing today is, how do I grow the value of my existing customers in a situation of greater and greater customer heterogeneity? Customers are more heterogeneous than ever. How do I grow their customer value? That's where personalization fits in. And that's where AI enabled personalization enables us. And that's why the CEO should care. And that's why the CFO should care.
I think what you make up a great point there, drilling down to that individual customer level. To me, this is not just, we typically talk about personalization on a one-to-one for an individual basis, but it's also for companies as well. If we look across, especially the software as a service space, organizations like Snowflake are growing. We talk about that growth of that individual customer. That's the speed, that's the value that the marketplace or the stock exchanges are pushing that, because you see organizations like HubSpot, Snowflake, they're growing 130, 150% on the existing customer base today. So to me, it's almost like those personalization characteristics that we're talking about at individual, it's almost we're able to talk about that more, across all different customer types, correct?
Absolutely. And where I thought you were headed, and I think consistent with your point, this applies to B2B as well as to B2C. In terms of, we've been talking about customer as a B2C individual consumer, but substitute business organization, business entity, particularly small and medium-sized businesses, for individual customer here, and everything we're talking about applies. And so absolutely, because in either case, whether it's a B2B setting where I say, okay, we have this existing account, how do we, yes, we want to retain the account, certainly we want to minimize attrition, but how do I grow the value? The CLV, we haven't used the term CLV yet, but what this is all about is driving customer lifetime value. And that customer can be an organizational customer, a B2B customer, or that customer can be, a person. And but in either case, it applies. And I'll add one more thing to it. It applies in more and more and more industries because customer heterogeneity, as I mentioned a minute ago, customer heterogeneity is increasing across industries. And that's ultimately what's foundational to personalization. And that is true whether you're in the retail industry or financial services or travel, but also if you're in the healthcare space, or you're in, any of the myriad of other categories that are now employing personalization. The AI enabled personalization.
Absolutely. And I think especially at the scale that we're talking about in a lot of organizations today, when you're talking about 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100, 100,000, 1 million customers, the only way you're going to get to that level of sophistication is through AI at this point.
And I would even continue multi-millions of customers simultaneously in real time. The only way you're going to be able to do that, particularly economically, is through the use of AI-enabled personalization, or AI personalization, as it's called these days. So I will stop my caffeine-driven monologue here for your next question.
No, that's great. That's great. So let's talk a little bit about it, compare and contrast. And maybe it's we could take this a lot of different directions. So I'll leave it kind of up to you. So when we look at like personalization, you have B2C versus B2B, you have across different industries, you have even a different cross of time. You mentioned that a little bit earlier, like, what the difference is between 10 years ago and now in personalization. So where do you see the biggest contrast, I guess, right now in the use of personalization out there today?
I think, and let me focus your question even specifically on AI personalization.
Yes, please.
Because personalization is a very, very well-established practice these days. And I think it's interesting, you mentioned earlier that I do a lot of work in loyalty programs for companies, a whole wide range of industries. I would say virtually, if not literally, every company, and so call that 15 or 20 in the last year and a half that I've worked with on loyalty programs, in every single case, enabling personalization is one of the main imperatives that they are undertaking. So stipulate that. So personalization, well established and growing across categories. AI personalization, I think the really interesting development there is that it has become accessible to organizations of all sizes, as the number of, SaaS based, SaaS delivered, AI enabled personalization tools out there has become very democratized, very widely available. And so I remember a few years ago, at 2018, 2019 maybe, when JP Morgan Chase, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal about how JP Morgan Chase was, using personalization for to drive their marketing messaging and other things. And that was, very visible, but I could imagine people saying, well, that's great, but I'm in a smaller company. I'm not Jamie Dimon. I'm not JP Morgan Chase. I'm in a smaller company. What does this mean for me? Well, fast forward to today, and this is literally, I think, more true with every passing month. There is a myriad now of providers out there who can provide AI personalization for small companies, mid-sized companies. This is no longer just available to companies with the scale and resources of JP Morgan Chase. So I think that's probably the biggest development, is what I'll call the democratization, the availability of AI personalization to companies of all sizes.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that, to me, is, if you're a small business or a mid-sized business today, the ability, you have personalization offerings from the cloud. You have from the 3 different clouds. You have it from SaaS solutions. Even within Dataiku itself, we have some personalization capabilities to apply. I guess a good question to ask you is, even the concept of personalization, should we be thinking about it just as AI driven personalization from this point forward? Is there any place where you're not doing that today?
I think that we're characterizing all personalization as AI personalization can be a little daunting, is for companies who are just starting on the personalization path, and can be sort of a bridge too far at the very beginning. Doesn't mean they can't get there quickly, but there are certain basic building blocks for personalization, such as having individually identifiable customers, such as being able to associate all transactions with the same customer, such as being able to track. I mean, these are the basic, fundamental
data building blocks you have to have.
That need to be in place in order to employ personalization and ultimately AI personalization. And so while I would say the state of the art today is AI personalization, the only circumstance where maybe jumping right to that is a little daunting is when companies are just starting out. Because what I'm sure in what you do, what I do, often is happening today is, for all of the right reasons, retailers, financial services companies, whoever may be saying, we need to start to employ personalization. Like, we got the message, there's value being created here. And so how do we get started on this? And those basic building blocks that I mentioned do have to be in place first.
Yeah, we talk a lot about kind of the maturity, AI maturity in my space. And we talk about those basic building blocks. So having the data itself in order to do that. And what you're talking about, it rings exactly true. And a lot of the customers today, as they start that AI journey, it's like, I can't think about, let's figure out the data first, and then we can work on the rest of it. But I think what you're saying there is, it's a fast follow. Once we've got that kind of data infrastructure in place, personalization is definitely one of those places where we can try to, start delivering value very quickly.
Absolutely.
Which actually brings us into our next segment, which is one of my favorites. And I think you've already talked about it a couple of times, is how do we make money, save money, or improve the customer experience when it comes to this? Well, I'm going to give this a little bit of a twist for you. I know a lot of your research goes into and around what legacy organizations are doing in terms of their use of AI, machine learning, and building out analytics capabilities. So how do a lot of these how do you talk to a legacy organization? You know, not everybody's Facebook, Amazon, even Dataiku where I live. But how does a legacy organization actually make money, save money, improve the customer experience when it comes to personalization? And if you've got any examples, we'd love to hear those.
Sure. Let's focus on your three questions. How do they make money? By growing customer value, by growing CLV. Meaning, how do they make more profit from existing customers? Number two, how do they save money? By not investing in delivering irrelevant marketing messages that are going to be waste and inefficiency, by improving the productivity of their marketing investment. And how do they improve the customer experience? By making those interactions more relevant. And whether that's an interaction when you go up, to the counter at a retailer, and that would assume, a point of sale enabled system there, or in other categories, how do you improve the customer experience? By making it more relevant. Relevance is in no one's best interest. And so irrelevance is in no one's best interest. And so improving that relevance improves the customer experience. And so then how do we explain this to legacy companies? I would say, number one, and I very intentionally keep bringing it back to and focusing on growing customer value, because ultimately, if I'm, the CEO, be it the CEO of a big retailer, travel company, financial services company, it can all sound like buzzwords as an end in themselves, when in fact, the fundamental importance of growing customer value to drive business value immediately gets everybody's attention and focuses us, whether you're a legacy company or a startup. And so I think that in legacy companies, the beauty, and what do we mean by legacy companies? We mean companies that are established, haven't been built from the ground up to enable.
They're not born on cloud. They're not, yeah.
Exactly. So they've been doing these things for decades, whether they're retailers or whatever other category. They've been doing these things for decades. Typically, one of the things that I find interesting in talking with legacy companies is everyone in every company thinks their IT systems are absolutely the worst, and that no company could possibly have IT systems as bad as theirs. Yeah. And well, the truth of the matter is that everybody's facing many of the same problems, is that these IT systems were built at different times in different eras on different platforms, often are the result of acquisitions that were done over time. And these systems are being asked to do things they were never designed to do originally in many cases. The beauty today, I think, for legacy companies is that, as we touched on earlier, so many of the practices we're talking about for AI personalization can now all be done in the cloud through any of a number of providers and don't need to be built internally, where the internal IT staff has enough to deal with already. And the other practical comment would be, again, for legacy companies, it isn't about revolutionizing the existing practices. It's about, in many cases, refining them, optimizing them, doing them more effectively. And as opposed to, we're going to recreate marketing in this company. Well, in a 100-year-old company, it's very well established. That sounds great in a book. In actual practice, it has a number of challenges. On the other hand, we're going to refine, increase the effectiveness of, increase our productivity, optimize, continuous optimization. Absolutely. And so I think that's, for legacy companies, as we said, who aren't AI native, so to speak. I think that's the path forward.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that you brought up something there that I think is a way, when I'm discussing it with clients, is it's not revolutionary, it's evolutionary. This is, while it may be revolutionary on your P&L, it's evolutionary in the way you think. This is the next step on how we might be able to go down the path. And we'd love to hear your ideas. How do you think about personalization? Are your organizations implementing it right now? Please drop us a comment here on LinkedIn, or on Facebook, and of course, anywhere else you might get your podcasts. So, Tom, I want you to put on your prognosticator cap, put on that magician's cap, and tell us kind of, what does the future hold here? And, how do you might think of it, in the next 2 years versus the next 10 years? Because even if I look back 10 years ago, like I remember when I purchased my first Dell computer way back in college, right? And that was my first interaction. It's like, holy wow, I can actually click around and get the actual system I wanted. If you told me what we're seeing right now today, I would be like, how would you ever do that? So what do you kind of see in the future for this?
What I, not just I, what we see emerging today is what really what I thought very interesting, great book by two Wharton professors, a book by the name of Connected Strategy, the title Connected Strategy, described how we are moving from episodic interactions, episodic transactions, they described it, to continuously connected customer relationships, where you have a rich flow of data, an ongoing real-time rich flow of data. What I think is really going to take this to a whole different level is when we combine that ongoing connected customer relationship, that ongoing rich flow of information with AI personalization. And let me give you two examples to illustrate. We're not talking, something off. The first example is right here, my Fitbit. I am, heavy duty Fitbit user, love my Fitbit,
So
Fitbit, obsessed about my Fitbit. And I look at this device and say, okay, now with the data that's coming off of this device, what can we do in the way of AI personalization? Or as the founder on a podcast a while ago, I heard James Park, the founder of Fitbit, say, our users aren't interested in being told what they did. They're interested in coaching behavior on what to do. Well, the possibilities for doing coaching behavior with AI personalization coming off of the data that's coming off of a Fitbit, I think are just absolutely fascinating, because I'm willing to speculate that probably by looking at my data, they can tell when my workout regimen has changed. Probably say, oh, it looks to us like you've added some strength training into your workout. It looks to us like, you could improve your whatever performance based on this, and do really fascinating coaching behavior. Now, let's move it out of the Fitbit to a little more advanced example. My wife wears something called a continuous blood glucose monitor, which is throwing off a continuous flow of data on her blood sugar. Now, if we think about again, obviously, all of this requires permission by the patient or the customer. We'll just stipulate that at the outset. Data privacy is critical here. Now, that gets really interesting about what could you do in the way of AI personalization if you've got that continuous flow of data coming off of a blood glucose monitor. Now, let me take it to a totally different type of connected relationship. John Deere, the green agriculture equipment that, you see in countries all over the world, where you are, where I am, here, everywhere. John Deere is very, very advanced in the use of, again, connected relationships through Internet of Things with those vehicles. And so whether it's the farmer sitting in her tractor and the data coming off of her Fitbit, or whether it's the tractor throwing off a continuous flow of information to optimize, i.e. personalize the fertilizer application, the seed application, and so on and so forth. In both cases, what you see is when we connected customer relationships with that ongoing real-time flow of information with AI personalization, I think it changes the whole ballgame and takes this all to a different level. And that's what I personally think is really, really fascinating to think about.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think if I'm looking into the future when it comes to personalization, it's almost becoming hyper, because we can start to take things, not just how I look at things like TikTok and Instagram, and what are the things people are liking together. So it's not even, we talk about going to one, but it's almost like coming back up again. How do we look at groups? How do all these groups start to interact with each other? So I start to think about kind of graph theory and how, who are the influencers of these different individuals, and how can we help personalize individuals and their interactions with each other based upon just a little bit of information from just a part of the graph itself. So for me, that becomes kind of a really interesting concept of how do we start to take what these individuals are doing and bring it up one level in terms of from a group perspective and how they might start to interact. The second piece for me is always, we talk a lot about on here on the Proof of Concept podcast, is responsible AI. And this is an area where we start to almost get a little bit nervous as a society. I think we can talk about an organization that's just north of you in Target, and what happened with, we'll put a link down in the URL. A few years ago, Target basically started to get personalization around ads and started to understand when women might be actually pregnant, and got really, really good at it, to the point that one individual, a woman who had a pastor father, basically she was getting these circulars from Target about baby stuff, and he's like, "Why are you getting this?" And it's like, "Oops, you got it." So the funny thing about that, though, is now Target, to kind of dissuade a little bit, or not to look too big brotherish, actually started to interject errata into the circulars themselves. So they might have a few elements of that, but they'll also hear, here's a tire equipment that might get interjected into it. So for me, that becomes, it'll be really important for a lot of the CEOs, the CDOs, as a part of this conversation, to at least understand, what are the guardrails around personalization, because I do think it, coming back to the one thing you kind of hit on, and we may even talk, this might make it into the title, is relevance, right? Personalization is relevance. And I think that's the one thing marketers have tried for the last 70 years for modern marketing to actually build for individuals, is that relevance. And the more they can do that, the better.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I think, the crux of it comes down to there's growing evidence that personalization demonstrably works. But the question is, why does it work? What makes it, what makes personalization work is relevance. And AI personalization enables us to create hyper relevance, and even to coin a term, predictive relevance, meaning we know something that is going to be relevant. We can predict something's going to be relevant to the customer before she or he even realizes they're going to need it.
Yeah. And I think we're all starting to see a little bit of that in our Instagram feeds and TikTok feeds at this point in time. So, Tom, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us here on the Proof of Concept podcast. And we'd love to hear your predictions as well here. Please drop us a comment, a like here on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. So Tom, thanks so much. Any place where people can catch what you're doing these days?
Well, not off the top of my head. I mean, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn probably, now that I'm thinking out the answer to your question. Probably the best place for someone who has nothing better to do in life than follow what I may be doing. LinkedIn would be the best place to do it.
Yeah.
And always glad to connect with people who have similar interests.
Yeah. And great, Tom. And I know you've done a lot of great articles in this area, and and everybody should pick up a couple of those. So thanks so much, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Proof of Concept podcast. Take care and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Grant.